Captain Cisco was baseball mad, had the fever and had it bad, just to see every legend of the old game. Cisco came. Then his old rival Solok said, "My Vulcan team is one you should dread." And Cisco stared down his longtime foe, said, "I know just where to go. Take me out to the Holosuite, play my crew with no crowd. Give them 2 weeks to learn how to play. Then for your hubris you'll finally pay, 'cause you'll whiff at Jake's slider. Your Vulcan team will surely beat, for it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out in the Holosuite." This is a review of the Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode, Take Me Out to the Holosuite. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know what the infield fly rule is, and trust me, you don't, but keep watching anyway, be warned. Spoilers beyond this point, it's a baseball episode of Star Trek. And it's my birthday. Not really. It feels like it, though. The starship Tacoumbra has put in for repairs at Deep Space Nine after spending 6 months in combat in the ongoing war against the Dominion. The captain of the Tacoumbra, Solok, just so happens to be an old rival of Captain Cisco, and during his meeting with Cisco to discuss the Tacumbra's repair schedule, Solok let slip that he and his crew, his all-Vulcan crew, have grown quite fond of a Holosuite program, a program Cisco might be interested in, a program based on an old Earth game. Cisco calls a meeting of his senior staff to tell them that they have been challenged by Solok and his crew to a contest of courage, teamwork, and sacrifice. Worf's like, "Just tell me whose head to rip off and whose neck to shit down," if they're not the same person. Everyone agrees to join the contest, then Kira asks the obvious question, what specifically is the contest? So Cisco tells them. That's right, it seems in their wartime perambulations of late, the Vulcans have been playing base, a certain game of ball. Now, Cisco's crew has just 2 weeks to learn the game and get ready to play against Solok's team. It won't be easy. Not only have none of them ever played baseball, they don't even know the rules. While Bashir, Ezri, and O'Brien are studying up in Quark's, Lita and Rom approach them and ask to try out for the team. Quark, meanwhile, has nothing but disdain for this silly human game. Though, after Lita and Rom leave, he does turn to O'Brien like, "What time are tryouts?" Cut to the baseball diamond on the Holosuite, where the gang has assembled for their first practice. Cisco has brought in Jake, who also knows the game, to be their pitcher. Things look pretty hopeless. Worf and Nog are pretty good, but most everyone else struggles even to play catch. Quark doesn't even have his glove on, for Christ's sake. Jake's like, "This is going to be a long 2 weeks." Cisco says, "Yeah, but we're going to beat Solok in that baseball game, even if I have to kill every single person on this field to do it." Cisco recruits Odo to be the umpire, because he wants an actual person calling balls and strikes instead of a hologram, and because he knows he can trust Odo to be completely fair and impartial. In the infirmary, Bashir delivers some bad news. Everyone is at least a little banged up, but Chief O'Brien is out of the game altogether with a torn rotator cuff. So Cisco designates O'Brien as a coach and pulls some strings to get his girlfriend, freighter captain and fellow baseball aficionado Cassidy Yates, back to the station. He sees to it that her next few upcoming cargo runs are reassigned, giving her plenty of time to help him get ball-based revenge on Solok. With Cassidy taking O'Brien's place at third, and Nog, Worf, and Kira all seeming to pick up the game pretty well, plus Jake's pitching and Cisco's own play and coaching, the team looks to be coming together. Well, except for Rom. That poor guy is hopeless. He can't field, he has no arm, he has no speed, and he can't hit for average or for power. He's a zero-tool player. When Rom fails to even make contact during batting practice, with Solok looking on from the stands, an embarrassed and enraged Cisco kicks Rom off the team. Later at Quark's, the rest of the team offers to quit in a show of solidarity unless Cisco lets Rom play. Cisco is taking this game way too seriously. The rest of them don't care about baseball, they just want to have fun. Rom convinces them to play without him. and promises to cheer them on from the stands once Nog reminds him that they're called the stands. Thanks to the magic of a montage, we see that the team is continuing to improve. Even the once dismissive Quark is practicing. Plus, Odo is working on his umpire moves. The game is just around the corner. But Cassidy notices how stressed out Sisko is over all of this. He doesn't seem to be having any fun at all. Cassidy asks what the deal is with Sisko and Solak anyway. Why is he so determined to beat him? Sisko tells her the backstory. He and Solak were cadets at the academy together. One night, they were out at a bar with their respective groups of friends, and a drunk Sisko got sick of listening to Solak bragging about how Vulcans were superior to emotional, illogical humans, and challenged Solak to a wrestling match, which Sisko promptly lost. That was bad enough. But what made it worse was how Solak has spent the rest of his career using Sisko as the example of why the logical Vulcan way was better than the emotional human way. Solak even wrote a series of psychology papers at the Academy and after he graduated, featuring analyses of their barroom wrestling match. And now Solak comes to Deep Space Nine, Sisko's house, and challenges him to play baseball? Sisko's game? Ain't no way in hell. This rational rat bastard is going down. Sisko is embarrassed about how obsessed he is with this petty rivalry with Solak, though, so he makes Cassidy promise not to tell the rest of the crew about it. Cut to Cassidy telling the rest of the crew about it. Of course, they're all on Sisko's side, and now they're more determined than ever to win the game, for their captain, and to put Solak in his place. It's game day! The teams, Sisko's Niners and Solak's Logicians, line up along the baselines as the Federation anthem plays. Then the crowd, which includes Rom, cheers. Then Sisko says to Solak, "Hey, let's lose the crowd. My team has never played in front of spectators before. Besides, paying all those extras is killing the episode budget." The game begins and the Logicians jump out into an immediate lead, which the Niners are unable to answer. By the bottom of the fifth inning, the Niners are down 7-0. Worf steps up to the plate with 2 outs and works the count to a full 3-2, and then Odo calls him out on a called strike, which Worf thought was ball 4. Worf argues, and then Sisko runs out to argue too, and we get to see Avery Brooks do his best Earl Weaver impression, and it's pretty good. Though it would have been a lot funnier if Sisko was about 3.5 feet tall like Earl was. Anyway, he pokes umpire Odo in the chest, and Odo's like, "Nope, you're not allowed to put hands on an official. You're out of here!" Muttering to himself about the injustice of it all, Sisko leaves the field and takes a seat in the empty stands in the same section as Rom, and O'Brien takes over as the manager of the Niners. The game continues to go poorly for the Niners. By the top of the 9th, they trail 10-0. Then the Vulcans drive in another run, or do they? There's a play at the plate, and catcher Nog gets the ball too late to make an out, but the Vulcan runner fails to touch home plate. Nog notices that Odo hasn't made any kind of a call because technically the ball is still in play. No run has scored because the runner didn't touch the plate, and no out has been recorded because it wasn't a force out and Nog didn't tag the runner. O'Brien figures out what's going on and tells Nog he has to tag the runner. So Nog runs into the Logician's dugout and starts going from Vulcan to Vulcan, tagging everyone because he failed to observe which player had just run in from third, or because Nog is racist and thinks all Vulcans look alike. I don't know. The player who failed to touch home jumps up and makes a break for it before Nog gets to him, and Nog fires a throw back to Jake, who is covering the plate, and Jake tags the runner out. In the stands, Sisko cheers with excitement. He turns to Rom like, "Did you see that play? That's what I love about this game. You never know what's going to happen next. Probably nothing, but you never know." Rom says, "Yeah, it looks like fun." And the icy shell of resentment that had encased Sisko's heart begins to melt in that moment, and he calls Rom over. They head into the clubhouse, and not long after, Sisko returns and calls O'Brien over and tells him to make a substitution. Rom has suited up and is ready to play. O'Brien sends Rom to the plate as a pinch hitter. And it's at this point that Odo should have forced Sisko to leave the Holosuite altogether and penalized the Niners with an automatic out or something, because Sisko was ejected from the game, which means he should not be managing the team, even from the stands, which he clearly is doing in this situation. by telling O'Brien to put Rom in the game. It's a nice, heartwarming moment for Rom, but I'm sorry, the rules are the rules. And if over 150 years of organized baseball has taught us anything, it's to always follow the rules. Nog reached third in the previous at-bat and is now poised in scoring position. It's the bottom of the ninth. Cisco, free from his previous tension, has the computer reinstate the crowd, and they roar as Rom steps into the batter's box. Strike one, strike two. Well, at least he's having fun. Then O'Brien's like, hey, what's that thing called where you just try to tap the ball down the baseline? Bashir says, a bunt. O'Brien's like, Rom should do that. O'Brien gets Rom's attention, and he and Bashir both frantically give Rom the sign to bunt, but Rom never learned the signs, so he just leans forward with the bat held out in front of him, trying to figure out what the hell O'Brien and Bashir are going on about. The pitcher delivers, the ball strikes Rom's bat, and hey, look at that! It's a perfect bunt. Rom runs to first, Nog charges home, there's the throw, Nog slides, safe! The Niners scored a run! The Niners scored a run! They clear the bench and rush the field like they just won the World Series and lift Rom up and carry him off the field. Solik approaches Odo and points out that, the game isn't over yet, but he also puts his hand on Odo's shoulder, and Odo's like, oh, you fucking did not. You're gone! After the game, which was presumably completed at some point, or maybe not, both teams are gathered at Quark's, but it's the Niners, the losing team, who are doing most of the celebrating. Cisco apologizes to Rom for kicking him off the team, and they shake hands. He says, hey, Rom, maybe one of these days you could show me how to bunt. He walks away, and Rom turns to Lita like, what's a bunt? Solik says to Cisco, I really don't know what you're even celebrating. The bunt that scored your only run was an accident. You lost the game. You're trying to manufacture a triumph where none exists. Bashir raises his glass like, to manufactured triumph! And Cisco and the rest of the team is like, manufactured triumph! Their good humor in the face of defeat has deprived Solik of what he most wanted from this experience, to rub his superiority in Cisco's face yet again. And Solik is starting to get a little pissy about it. Kira tosses Cisco a ball that the whole team has autographed, and Cisco offers to let Solik sign it too, at which point Solik exits in a huff. Cisco tosses the ball into the air. We dissolve from the ball to an exterior of the rotating space station, and that's the ball game. Should I even bother telling you what I think about this one? I love baseball. I love Star Trek. Of course, I love this episode. But the episode has more going for it than the mere novelty of seeing Star Trek characters play baseball. It's genuinely funny at times. And it has some good character writing, including a nice arc for Captain Cisco. It also has its flaws, but I'll get to those in a bit. The biggest problem the writers of the episode had to solve was why our characters would be playing a baseball game in the first place. True, Cisco's love of the game was established in the series premiere and has been a consistent part of his character all along, which is why the concept of a baseball episode even remotely makes sense. But Cisco's liking baseball isn't enough of a justification all by itself. Cisco's baseball fandom is unusual in the world of the series because baseball is no longer a well-known sport. The professional game hasn't existed on Earth for centuries. Few people in the 20th century know about it, and even fewer have ever played it. The writers solve this problem and give the episode its comedic foundation by making the impetus for the game a childish rivalry between Cisco and Captain Solik. Having two teams of future space people play a game that no longer exists in the middle of an interstellar war is an exceedingly silly concept, so of course it must be done for an exceedingly silly reason. Solik is an arrogant dick who taunts Cisco by challenging him in baseball, Cisco's game, and Cisco is determined to shove that challenge up Solik's ass. That's the why of the baseball game. The how mostly involves Cisco's team struggling to learn how to play in a hurry and never quite making it out of the hapless stage. The story then settles into a rough jocks versus nerds formula, though not exactly, because the Vulcans are both jocks and nerds. You know what I mean? The odds are very much against Cisco's Niners. They aren't presented as having any real shot at winning the game. And in the only major deviation from the formula, They don't win the game. They don't even come close to winning the game. They get pulverized. But in the end, it doesn't matter to them because they had fun. Sisko's arc, which takes him from being so determined to defeat Solak that he squeezes all the joy out of playing baseball for everyone else, to being so moved by the inherent beauty of the game itself that he gives up his grudge against Solak in order to give Rom a turn at bat, is very well done. Avery Brooks is wonderful as expected when Sisko is giving inspiring coach speeches or barking at the umpire or biting Rom's head off and kicking him off the team. But he also shines in the scene with Cassidy in his quarters when he demonstrates some self-awareness. He knows how childish it is for him to be this invested in beating Solak in a game. He knows this is something he should just let go. But he can't. Not yet, anyway. He should forget it. He should stop letting Solak bait him like this. He should be the bigger man. But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to win. Allowing himself to be led by his bitterness turns Sisko into a pretty unlikable guy. Kicking Rom off the team is one of the nastiest things he's ever done. I think he was more likable when he was poisoning the atmosphere of that planet to catch Eddington. He's so out of line that the rest of the crew is ready to quit and only remain on the team after Rom pleads with them to keep playing. His single-minded focus on winning means that he takes no pleasure in the game at all, and ultimately gets himself kicked out for pointlessly arguing a call with the umpire. But then, once he is a spectator again, once he has been removed from the competition and is able to just watch the game, he is reminded of why he loves baseball. The play at the plate where the Vulcan runner fails to touch the base and Nog runs into the dugout tagging people. Sisko sees that and he suddenly doesn't care that his team is losing. That doesn't matter. What matters is that was an incredible play. It's not winning the game that's important. It's playing the game. And Sisko knew that all along. He just lost the ball in the sun for a while. And it took him most of the episode to find it. The writing for the characters other than Sisko is strong as well. I enjoy how the novice baseball players throw themselves into the game, quizzing each other on the rules, practicing skills even off the field, like when we see Quark doing a catch drill using drink glasses in his bar. And I like how not everyone on the Niners is completely inept. Sisko, Jake, and Cassidy are good because they have experience, but Worf, Nog, and Kira look like they at least get the basics down pretty quickly. Ezri makes that fancy Dan catch in the outfield during the big game. Even Quark, who started out turning his nose up at the very idea of baseball, winds up looking not bad. Only Rom stands out as exceptionally terrible, which is a bit of an inside joke since Max Grodenchik, the actor who plays Rom, played semi-pro ball in his youth and was far and away the best player in the cast and had to work hard to make Rom suck so convincingly. I also appreciate that Bashir doesn't become a star player. His genetic enhancements are mentioned once, but they never really come into play during the game. His most significant contribution to the episode is helping O'Brien deliver the bunt sign to Rom. It just goes to show you, genetically engineered reflexes and hand-eye coordination or not, baseball is fucking hard. It's so hard, Worf can't even get a hit. And he played for the Giants in another life. The episode does give Worf a few of his more memorable moments in the series, however, arguing that called third strike with Odo, and his take-no-prisoners attitude toward the game in general, exemplified by his two best lines, flatly declaring, "We will destroy them," when Sisko first tells everyone about the upcoming game against the Vulcans, and shouting, "Death to the opposition!" when Sisko calls for some on-field chatter. Sisko choosing Odo as the umpire is a minor stroke of genius. If there was ever a Star Trek character born to play a particular role in a baseball game, it's Odo being the umpire. Rom's desire to play, despite his ineptitude, and to use the game as a way to spend some time with Nog is touching, and a nice way for the episode to acknowledge one of the reasons why, regardless of how high or low the TV ratings for games are, baseball continues to endure in our culture. It's generational. It's part of our families and our shared history. We learn it from our parents and grandparents, and we pass it on to our children. Well, not me. I never had children, thank God. It would be nice to have someone to play catch with, though. The formulaic nature of the episode doesn't hurt it that much, though it does seem to get a little mixed up as to which formula it's following. At a certain point, Sisko's arc is mostly well maintained throughout, but his rivalry with Solak gets lost, and Solak himself mostly disappears from the episode between his initial challenge and the game. In fact, he isn't all that present during the game either, though, despite his lack of screen time, he does still leave an impression. Gregory Wagrowski knows how to play an asshole Vulcan. In the same way, Rom's story gets muddled as well. We still get the setup and payoff for his big moment in the game, but the thread goes slack in the middle, and the idea of him wanting to play in order to spend time with Nog is just present enough throughout the episode to register, nothing more. Also, as much as I like the big play at the plate that snaps Sisko out of his bitterness, I've always had a problem with how much it asks us to take for granted for the sake of the comedy. The idea of a runner not touching home plate and Nog having to go tag everyone in the Vulcan dugout is a funny concept, but the way it's presented in the episode, it only makes sense if, as I said previously in the plot summary, Nog wasn't paying attention to who the runner just was, or he genuinely can't tell one Vulcan from another. Both of those feel like awfully weak justifications, since Nog has been shown as one of the better players on the team and doesn't seem like an all Vulcans look alike to me kind of guy. I like the gag. I just wish the creators of the episode had come up with a setup for it that made more sense. Maybe the play at the plate was a little more chaotic. Maybe 2 Vulcan runners came in to score, and there was a base running mishap that caused them to both cross the plate within seconds of each other, and only one of them failed to touch the plate, and in the confusion, Nog didn't know which one it was. I don't know, something other than Nog is either an inattentive shithead or a racist shithead would have been nice. Take Me Out to the Holosuite was written by Ronald D. Moore. Do I need to quote from the guy's Star Trek resume? Writer of dozens of Next Gen and Deep Space Nine episodes, and exactly 2 Voyager episodes before he left that series in one of the most understandable incidents of rage quitting in television history. He wrote or co-wrote Yesterday's Enterprise, Family, Relics, Chain of Command, Tapestry, All Good Things, Our Man Bashir, Trials and Tribulations, It's Only a Paper Moon, plus Star Trek First Contact, and also, unfortunately, Star Trek Generations, which just proves that nobody bats 1,000. The episode was directed by Chip Chalmers, who racked up most of his Star Trek credits as an assistant director, but has a pretty impressive record as a director. Aside from this episode, he also directed TNG's The Wounded and Ethics, and DS9's The Magnificent Ferengi. Now that's what I call a battery. Due to their deservedly respected arsenal of dramatic fastballs and morally ambiguous breaking pitches, we often forget that the producers of Deep Space Nine also knew when to throw a changeup. Take Me Out to the Holosuite not only gives us a break from the ongoing Dominion War story, it's also atypical for a holodeck episode. Nobody is trapped in the holodeck, nothing that happens there is tied to a crisis on the ship, or the station in this case. There aren't even romantic stakes, as is the case in the previous episode I reviewed in this series, His Way. It's just the setting for a lighthearted riff on an underdog sports movie. And it works on that level. It's lightweight, it's formulaic, but it's entertaining, and it reminds us that, at least in sports, what's really important is not whether you win or lose, but how you play the game. Is the episode a home run? Not quite, but it is a solid stand-up double. Those are my thoughts on Take Me Out to the Holosuite. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next time as this batch of holodeck episode reviews continues. We're moving on to a series that did quite a few holodeck shows. Some might say too many. Star Trek Voyager, to look at an episode from Voyager's first season called Heroes and Demons. See you next time for that. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.